I made a mistake coming here tonight. That thought kept running through my head as I sat alone at table 7 in the Magnolia Room, watching couples laugh over wine and desserts I couldn't afford even if I wanted to order them. My buddy Tyler had practically begged me to show up for this blind date with his cousin, saying a few months was long enough to hide from the world. 2 years since I walked into my apartment and found Emma in our bed with my business partner. 2 years since I lost everything in one night. The restaurant smelled like money and Christmas trees, all white tablecloths and candles that probably cost more than my electric bill. I checked my phone again. 7:18. My date was 18 minutes late, and part of me hoped she wouldn't show up at all. At least then I could leave without feeling guilty about wasting anyone's time. Tyler's last text said she was perfect for me, but Tyler also thought starting a juice cleanse in December was a good idea, so his judgment wasn't exactly reliable. I was about to fake a work emergency and bolt when I noticed her 3 tables over. At first, I thought I was seeing things because what were the chances? But no, that was definitely Margaret Hayes sitting there in a navy blue dress, staring at her phone like it contained the worst news in the world. Emma's mom. I hadn't seen her since the breakup, hadn't talked to her since that awkward phone call where I tried to explain why I couldn't come to her birthday dinner anymore. During the 2 years Emma and I dated, Margaret treated me better than my own parents did. She remembered I hated cilantro and always made sure there was sweet tea when I came over because she knew it reminded me of my grandmother. She asked about my coffee shop dreams and actually listened when I talked about wanting to leave the corporate partnership that was slowly killing my soul. Now she sat there alone, and something felt wrong about the whole picture. Margaret was the kind of person who lit up a room just by walking into it, but tonight she looked small and nervous. A waiter appeared at her table carrying a champagne bottle, and I watched the whole scene unfold like a car accident in slow motion. The waiter's voice carried across the restaurant. "Compliments of your date, miss. He pre-ordered this earlier to celebrate." Margaret looked up at him with confusion, then back down at her phone. Her face went pale. "He's actually not coming," she said, and even from 3 tables away, I could hear her voice crack. "I'll just pay for my water." The waiter's face fell. "Oh, I'm so sorry," he announced, way too loud, like he was telling the whole restaurant about her failure. And that's exactly what happened. Every single person within 4 tables turned to look. Some pretended they weren't staring, but I saw them whispering to their dinner partners. Saw them glancing over with pity or judgment or maybe both. Margaret's hands shook as she reached for her purse, and I felt something twist in my chest. This woman had just finalized her divorce last year after Emma's dad left her for someone half his age. She'd lost 30 pounds from stress and had to sell the house she loved because she couldn't afford it alone. Emma told me all this during one of our last fights, using her mom's pain as ammunition somehow. Said I didn't understand what real heartbreak looked like. I understood it now, watching Margaret try to gather her things while maintaining whatever dignity she had left. The couple next to her whispered something and the woman shook her head sadly. An older man 2 tables behind her caught my eye and shrugged like he was saying, "Women, what can you do?" My whiskey sat untouched in front of me. My own date was now 25 minutes late, and honestly, I'd forgotten she existed. All I could see was Margaret counting out cash with trembling fingers, her shoulders hunched forward like she was trying to disappear. This wasn't right. None of this was right. Margaret Hayes brought me homemade soup when I had the flu during Christmas 2 years ago. She stood up to Emma's dad at Thanksgiving dinner when he made a joke about my coffee shop plans being childish. She told me once that I reminded her of her younger brother who died in a car accident. Said I had the same kind heart he did. I couldn't just sit here and watch her leave humiliated while strangers whispered about her. My hand moved to my wallet before my brain caught up. Inside, tucked behind my expired gym membership card, was my grandmother's ring. White gold with a small diamond, nothing fancy but it meant everything. Grandma Rose left it to me 3 years ago with a note saying, "Give this to someone who makes you believe in magic again." I'd carried it ever since, not sure what else to do with it. Never thought I'd use it for something like this. But watching Margaret stand up to leave, watching her blink back tears while the waiter apologized again, I knew exactly what I had to do. It was completely insane. It would probably blow up in my face. Tyler would think I'd lost my mind, and Emma would definitely hear about this somehow. But I was already standing up, already walking toward table 12, already committed to the craziest idea I'd ever had. Margaret had her back to me, focused on putting her wallet away. She didn't see me coming. Margaret was sliding her chair back when I dropped into the seat across from her. She looked up, startled, and for a second, neither of us moved. Recognition hit her face, followed by confusion, followed by something that might have been embarrassment. "Jason!" Her voice was barely a whisper. "What are you doing here?" I leaned forward and spoke loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, loud enough to drown out their whispers about her. "Margaret, I'm so sorry I'm late. Traffic coming from downtown was absolutely insane. There was an accident on Broad Street and everything backed up for miles." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Her mouth opened and closed twice before words came out. "I don't understand. You're not my date. I'm supposed to be meeting someone named Robert from my book club. We've been planning this for weeks." Perfect. Now I had a name for the jerk who stood her up. I kept my voice steady and reached across the table to take her hand. She flinched at the contact but didn't pull away. "I know this seems confusing right now," I said, making sure the couple next to us could hear every word. "But I promise everything is going to make sense in just a minute. Please just trust me." Margaret's eyes darted around the restaurant, landing on all the faces still watching her. She bit her lip, and I saw the exact moment she understood something strange was happening but didn't know what yet. Her fingers tightened around mine. "Jason, what are you doing?" She hissed it this time, quieter. I stood up fast, my chair scraping against the floor with a screech that made everyone look over. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This was it. No going back after this. I'd either save her from this nightmare or make it 10 times worse. "Actually, I can't wait another second," I announced to the entire room. Margaret's eyes went wide as dinner plates. "What are you talking about? Wait another second for what?" Then I dropped to one knee right there on the hardwood floor between our tables. The restaurant went completely silent. Even the kitchen noise seemed to stop. I pulled my grandmother's ring from my pocket, held it up where everyone could see, and watched Margaret's face go from confused to shocked to absolutely frozen. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What are you doing?" I kept my voice low, just for her. "Saving you. Just play along, please. I promise I'll explain everything. But right now you need to trust me. You don't deserve this humiliation." Then I raised my voice for everyone else. "Margaret Hayes, I've been planning this evening for weeks. I wanted everything to be perfect, but sitting here right now, I realize perfect doesn't matter. What matters is that I can't imagine another day without you in my life." Margaret's hands were shaking. She kept looking at the ring, then at me, then at all the people watching us with their phones out recording. "Jason, this is insane. We can't do this. Your ex-girlfriend is my daughter. Will you marry me?" I said it loud and clear, and the restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, real ones this time, but different from the humiliated tears I'd seen before. These looked like panic and confusion and maybe something else I couldn't name. "You're out of your mind," she whispered. "Please," I whispered back. "Just say yes. We'll figure everything else out later. But right now, just let me give you an out from this horrible situation. You were kind to me when Emma and I were together. You made me feel like family. Let me do this one thing for you." I watched her throat work as she swallowed, watched her glance around at all the staring faces one more time. The waiter stood frozen near the kitchen door. The couple who'd been whispering had their phones pointed at us. An older woman at the bar had her hand over her mouth. Margaret looked back at me, and I saw the decision happen in her eyes before she spoke. "Yes," she said, and it came out shaky and unsure. "Yes," I repeated, making sure everyone heard. She nodded, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes appeared on her face. "Yes, Jason. I'll marry you." The restaurant erupted. People started clapping and cheering like they just witnessed something beautiful instead of the most insane rescue attempt in history. I slid the ring onto Margaret's finger, and it fit perfectly, which felt like some kind of sign from the universe or my grandmother or both. Margaret stared at it like it might bite her. I stood up and pulled her into a hug, partly for show and partly because she looked like she might faint. Against her ear, I whispered fast, "I'm so sorry for ambushing you like this. I saw you getting stood up and everyone staring, and I just couldn't let that happen. You were always so kind to me when Emma and I were together. You didn't deserve to sit here humiliated." Her arms came around my back slowly, returning the hug for the audience. "You just proposed to your ex-girlfriend's mother in front of 50 people, she whispered back. "Emma is going to lose her mind when she finds out about this. What were you thinking?" "I wasn't thinking. I just acted." Clearly, the waiter appeared at our table with the champagne Margaret's real date had ordered. His face split in a huge grin. "Congratulations. This calls for a celebration. The champagne is on the house now." He popped the cork and more people clapped. Someone from another table sent over dessert. A woman I'd never met came up to take our picture, gushing about how romantic the whole thing was. Margaret smiled for every photo, played the part perfectly, but I felt how rigid her shoulders were under my arm. We sat back down at her table because standing felt too exposed. The second we were semi-alone again, Margaret leaned close. "Okay, you need to explain what just happened right now. Start talking." I took a breath and dove in, keeping my voice low. "I was here for a blind date that Tyler set up. She never showed, or maybe she did and left when she saw me, I don't know. I noticed you 3 tables over and realized who you were. Then I watched that waiter announce your date canceled and everyone started staring and whispering, and I just couldn't stand it. So your solution was to propose? To me? Your ex's mother." She said it like she was trying to make sense of a dream. It was the only thing I could think of that would flip the narrative fast enough. Now, instead of being the woman who got stood up, you're the woman who just got engaged. People will remember tonight completely differently. Margaret picked up her champagne with shaking hands and took a long drink. "This is the most bizarre thing that's ever happened to me. And I've been through a divorce and a pandemic, so that's saying something." "I know. I'm sorry. We can tell everyone the truth right now if you want. I'll stand up and announce I'm insane and you had nothing to do with it." She looked around at all the smiling faces, at the phones that had definitely recorded everything and were probably uploading to social media already. "I think it's too late for that. This is going to be everywhere by morning." We sat there in the fanciest restaurant in Richmond, fake engaged, while strangers kept congratulating us, and I tried to figure out how my simple plan to help someone had turned into the most complicated situation of my entire life. Margaret's call came through at exactly 8:47 the next morning, and her voice sounded like she'd been awake all night. "Jason, we need to talk right now. This is so much bigger than either of us thought." I was already halfway out the door before she finished the sentence because the panic in her tone made my stomach drop. I told her to meet me at Riverside Coffee in 20 minutes, and I'd have answers ready even though I had absolutely no idea what those answers would be. When I walked into my coffee shop, Margaret was already there waiting by the window booth, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual put-together outfit. Her phone sat on the table between us, and the screen showed our proposal video with a view count that made my head spin. Over 2 million people had watched us in less than 12 hours. I slid into the seat across from her and just stared at that number, trying to make sense of how a random Tuesday night turned into this massive thing that everyone in Richmond seemed to know about. Margaret pushed her phone toward me and pulled up her messages. "Diana called me 6 times before I even woke up. She wants to throw us an engagement party next weekend. Your friend Tyler texted me somehow and said congratulations. And look at this." She scrolled to show me an email from a local news station called Good Morning Richmond asking if we'd come on their show to talk about our romantic Christmas proposal story. They wanted to film us at the restaurant where it happened and interview us about finding love again after hard times. I ran my hands through my hair and tried to think clearly. My business partner from the shop called to ask why he found out about my engagement from social media instead of from me. Half the customers who came in this morning wanted to know about my fiancé. This is spreading faster than we can control it. We sat there in silence for maybe 3 full minutes, both of us scrolling through messages and comments and shares. People we hadn't talked to in years were reaching out with congratulations. Strangers were leaving comments about how beautiful the proposal was and how they wished someone would love them that way. The whole thing felt like it was spinning out of control, and I could see Margaret's hands shaking slightly as she set her phone down. "We have two choices," I finally said, keeping my voice low even though we were the only ones in the shop this early. "We can tell everyone the truth right now. Explain that you got stood up. I panicked and did something crazy to help, and the whole thing was fake. Or we keep going with this for a few weeks until the attention dies down. Then quietly say it didn't work out and go our separate ways." Margaret twisted the ring on her finger, and I noticed she was still wearing it even though she'd had all night to take it off. If we tell the truth now, I look terrible twice. First I got stood up by some guy who couldn't even bother to show up. Then I got fake proposed to because someone felt sorry for me. I don't think I can handle everyone knowing that. Her voice cracked a little on the last part, and I felt guilty all over again for putting her in this position. I nodded slowly because I understood exactly what she meant. "If we keep pretending, we're committing to a real lie though. Your sister Rebecca is going to want to meet me properly. Tyler's going to ask a million questions. We'd have to keep this up through Christmas and New Year's, which means family dinners and parties and constantly being around people who think we're actually together." Margaret looked out the window at the empty street, and I could see her thinking through all the complications. "What do we tell people who know the real story? We can't lie to everyone. We tell our closest people that it started as a rescue, but we're seeing where things go," I suggested, the plan forming as I spoke. "That way it's mostly true. We're spending time together to keep up appearances, and maybe by January we'll know each other well enough that breaking up won't feel weird." She turned back to me with something like relief on her face. 3 weeks. We keep this up for 3 weeks through the holidays. Then after New Year's we quietly tell people it didn't work out. No drama. No big announcement. Just a simple "we realized we weren't right for each other's" situation. I stuck out my hand to shake on it, trying to make the moment feel less heavy. 3 weeks of being fake engaged to my ex-girlfriend's mother. This is definitely the strangest thing I've ever agreed to. Margaret actually laughed and shook my hand. For what it's worth, last night was the first time in 2 years I felt anything other than lonely or angry. So thank you for that. Even if this whole situation is completely insane. We spent the next hour at the coffee shop working out the details of our story. We decided we'd say that we'd run into each other a few weeks ago and started talking, realized we had a connection, and things moved quickly from there. We'd keep the part about me dating Emma years ago because too many people knew that already, but we'd say we'd always had a spark that we never acted on back then. It felt strange creating a fake history with someone, but Margaret was surprisingly good at coming up with details that sounded believable. Right as we were finishing up, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. A woman's voice came through introducing herself as Jennifer Park from the Richmond Times, and she wanted to do a feature story about our engagement for their holiday edition. She'd seen the video and thought our story about second chances and unexpected love would be perfect for their Christmas special section. I looked at Margaret with wide eyes and mouthed newspaper at her. She went pale but nodded for me to keep talking. I told Jennifer we'd think about it and call her back, then hung up feeling dizzy. A newspaper wants to interview us. This isn't just social media anymore. This is becoming actual news. Margaret stood up and grabbed her coat. "We need rules. Clear boundaries about what we will and won't do. I'm not comfortable with lying to reporters or doing TV interviews. Social media is one thing, but actively seeking attention feels wrong." I agreed completely. We decided right there that we'd politely decline any media requests, keep our social media posts minimal, and just focus on convincing our immediate circles that this was real. If we kept our heads down and didn't feed the story, it would die out naturally by January. The days after our coffee shop meeting blurred together in a strange mix of fake couple appearances and genuine conversations. We attended 2 holiday parties where people congratulated us, had dinner with Margaret's book club where everyone wanted to hear the proposal story, and somehow ended up spending more time together than our 3-week agreement technically required. Then December 23rd hit me harder than I expected, and I found myself at Oakwood Cemetery at 10 in the morning standing in front of my grandmother's grave. She'd raised me after my parents died when I was 8, and she'd been gone for 3 years now. I was telling her about the crazy fake proposal situation when I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Margaret walking up the path carrying flowers. She stopped when she saw me, surprise clear on her face. "Jason, what are you doing here?" I gestured at my grandmother's headstone. "Visiting family. Today's the anniversary of when she passed." "What about you?" Margaret's expression softened with understanding. "My mom's buried just over that hill under the maple tree. She died 5 years ago today, right before Christmas. I come every year." We stood there for a moment in this strange shared space of grief, and something shifted between us. This wasn't part of the fake engagement plan. This was just two people who understood what it meant to lose someone important and still show up on the hard days. Margaret asked if she could sit with me for a bit, and I said yes without thinking about it. We ended up spending 2 hours at the cemetery, trading stories about the people we'd lost. Margaret told me about her mom Eleanor, who'd taught her to bake and always knew when something was wrong even if Margaret didn't say anything. I told her about my grandmother Ruth, who'd worked 2 jobs to raise me and never once made me feel like a burden. We talked about how weird it felt to move forward with life when part of you was still stuck in the past with the people who shaped you. "Eleanor would have liked you," Margaret said quietly as we walked back toward the parking area. "She always said the measure of a person was what they did when nobody was watching. You helped me when you had nothing to gain from it. That would have mattered to her." I felt something warm spread through my chest at those words. Ruth would have called this whole fake engagement situation ridiculous, but then would have made us dinner and told us to figure it out. She was practical like that. Margaret laughed, and it sounded genuine instead of polite. "Want to grab lunch? I don't feel like being alone right now, and I'm guessing you don't either." We went to this small diner called Pete's Place that had been around forever, sliding into a corner booth that smelled like coffee and pancakes. Over burgers and fries, the conversation shifted from grief to lighter things. Margaret told me about her job as a museum curator and how she spent her days surrounded by history and art. I told her about opening Riverside Coffee after I'd left my business partnership with Derek, how starting over had been terrifying but necessary. "Why did you really leave the partnership?" Margaret asked, stealing one of my fries. "Emma always said you and Derek had a great thing going." I hesitated, then figured honesty was easier than making up another story. Derek and Emma were having an affair. I walked in on them at the office Christmas party 2 years ago, found them in the supply closet, and everything I thought I knew about my life just fell apart in about 30 seconds. Margaret's face went through several emotions quickly: shock, anger, sympathy, then settled on something that looked like sadness. "I didn't know Derek was involved. Emma told me you two just grew apart and it was mutual." "Yeah, well, your daughter has a talent for rewriting history." The words came out more bitter than I intended, and I immediately felt bad. "Sorry, that's not fair. This isn't your fault." But Margaret shook her head firmly. "No, you're right to be angry. Emma hurt you badly, and I'm sorry she did that. I'm sorry I didn't reach out after the breakup. I wanted to, but it felt inappropriate since she's my daughter." We sat with that honesty for a moment, and I realized this was the first real conversation Margaret and I had ever had. When I dated Emma, Margaret had always been kind but distant, like she was being polite to her daughter's boyfriend but keeping proper boundaries. Now, sitting across from her without that awkwardness between us, I could see why people liked her. She listened when you talked instead of just waiting for her turn to speak. Christmas Eve arrived faster than I expected, and Margaret called me sounding nervous. "Rebecca wants you to come to dinner tonight. She's very suspicious about how fast this all happened, and I think she's planning to interrogate you." "I'm sorry. I know this wasn't part of the deal." I showed up at Margaret's house at 6 with a bottle of wine and a knot in my stomach. Rebecca opened the door with her arms crossed and eyes that could see straight through lies, looking me up and down like I was a suspect in a crime. "So you're engaged after one date? That's either fate or complete insanity, and I'm trying to figure out which one applies here." Margaret appeared behind her sister and shot me an apologetic look. "Rebecca, be nice. Jason, come in." Ignore my sister's hostile interrogation tactics. Dinner was tense at first, with Rebecca asking pointed questions about how we reconnected and why things moved so quickly. I stuck to our rehearsed story about running into each other and feeling an unexpected connection, about realizing that sometimes you know quickly when something feels right. Rebecca wasn't buying it completely, but Margaret jumped in with stories about how kind I'd always been when I dated Emma, how I'd helped her fix her computer once and brought her soup when she was sick. Emma mentioned you opened a coffee shop, Rebecca said, cutting into her chicken with more force than necessary. How's that going? I swallowed hard. It's going okay. Struggling a bit with the usual new business challenges, but I'm working through it. I didn't mention the $15,000 I was behind on rent or the eviction notice sitting in my desk drawer. That felt too personal to share with someone who already didn't trust me. After dinner, Rebecca cornered me in the kitchen while Margaret was in the bathroom. She stepped close and lowered her voice. I don't know what's really happening here, but Margaret's been lonely since the divorce. Really lonely in a way that worries me. She puts on a brave face, but I know my sister. If this is real, then good. She deserves happiness. But if you're playing some game or using her to get back at Emma, I will make your life extremely difficult. Are we clear? I met her eyes and spoke honestly. I'm not trying to hurt Margaret. I promise you that, whatever this is, I'm taking it seriously. Rebecca studied my face for a long moment, then nodded once and walked away. Margaret appeared next to me looking concerned. What did she say to you? Just establishing boundaries, I said with a small smile. She's protective. That's good. You should have people who protect you. Margaret's expression softened, and she squeezed my hand quickly before letting go. Thank you for coming tonight. I know it wasn't easy. Christmas morning, I woke up planning to spend the day alone at the coffee shop doing inventory. But at 8 o'clock, someone knocked on my apartment door, and I opened it to find Margaret standing there holding a bag from the bakery and 2 cups of coffee. You shouldn't be alone on Christmas, she said simply. I know we're fake engaged, but we're also friends now, right? Friends don't let friends spend holidays alone. We ended up at my place watching old movies and talking about everything and nothing. Somewhere around noon, Margaret asked about my family beyond my grandmother, and I told her about my parents dying in a car accident when I was young. She told me about her divorce from Emma's father Thomas, how he'd left her for a younger woman after 25 years of marriage and how that betrayal had broken something in her that she was still trying to fix. By the time Margaret left that evening, something had changed between us. The fake engagement was starting to feel less fake, and I wasn't sure if that was good or terrifying. Emma showed up at my coffee shop 3 days after Christmas, and I knew the second I saw her face that this wasn't going to be a friendly visit. She walked straight up to the counter where I was making drinks for the morning rush and slammed her phone down so hard 2 customers turned to stare. On her screen was our proposal video with over 2 million views, and her face was red with anger. You're dating my mother? My actual mother? Are you out of your mind? She yelled, and I felt my whole body go tense because I'd been dreading this conversation for weeks. I tried to stay calm and asked if we could talk somewhere private, but Emma wasn't having it. She started saying how this was disgusting and wrong, how I was clearly trying to get revenge on her for what happened 2 years ago. You're using her to hurt me, and it's pathetic, she said, and I felt anger rising in my chest because that wasn't true at all. Before I could respond, the door opened and Margaret walked in carrying pastries she'd picked up from the bakery down the street. She stopped dead when she saw Emma, and her face went pale. Emma turned on her immediately, voice getting even louder. Mom, what are you thinking? He's my ex-boyfriend. This is so messed up I don't even know where to start. Margaret set the pastries down carefully on the nearest table, and I watched her take a deep breath like she was gathering strength. She walked over to Emma with her head held high and said in a voice that didn't shake at all, I'm thinking that I'm 52 years old and I get to make my own choices about who I spend time with. Emma laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Choices? You're embarrassing yourself. Everyone's talking about how desperate you must be to date someone half your age who used to be with your daughter. I stepped forward then because I couldn't let Emma talk to Margaret like that. I'm 34, not 20. And what your mom and I have isn't about you at all. Emma's eyes flashed with something mean. Of course it's about me. You're doing this because I hurt you, and now you want to hurt me back by stealing my mother. Margaret's voice cut through sharp and clear. I'm not something that can be stolen, Emma, and this conversation is over. You need to leave. But Emma wasn't done. She pulled out her phone again and started typing fast. Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you when everyone finds out what kind of person you really are. She looked at me with pure hate. I'm going to tell everyone the truth about your proposal. That it was fake. That you made a fool of my mother in public. My stomach dropped because if Emma exposed us before we were ready, it would look so much worse than if we told people ourselves. Margaret grabbed Emma's wrist gently but firmly. Go ahead and tell them. Tell them Jason saw me getting stood up on a blind date and couldn't stand to watch me be humiliated. So he pretended to be my date and proposed to save me from embarrassment. Tell them we were going to fake it for a few weeks and then break up quietly, but instead we fell in love for real. Go ahead, Emma. Tell everyone. Emma's mouth fell open like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. You're admitting it was fake? Margaret nodded slowly. It started fake. But what we have now is the realest thing I've felt since your father and I divorced. And I'm not going to apologize for finding happiness just because you don't approve. Emma's face twisted up, and for a second I thought she might actually cry. Instead, she shoved her phone in her pocket and headed for the door. She stopped with her hand on the handle and looked back at both of us. You two deserve each other. And when this blows up in your faces, don't come crying to me. The door slammed behind her, and the coffee shop was dead silent except for the espresso machine hissing in the background. Margaret turned to me with wide eyes. Did I just make everything worse? I pulled her into my arms right there in front of everyone still staring at us. No. You just made everything better by choosing us. That night, Margaret and I sat in my apartment trying to figure out our next move. We knew Emma would follow through on her threat to expose us, and we needed to get ahead of it. Margaret was pacing back and forth, and I could see her hands shaking every time she pushed her hair behind her ears. What if people think I'm pathetic? What if they believe, Emma, that you're just using me? I stood up and took both her hands in mine, making her look at me. Then we tell them the truth first. We control the story, not Emma. We spent 2 hours writing and rewriting what we wanted to say, filming it over and over until it felt right. We sat on my couch with my laptop balanced on the coffee table, and Margaret held my hand so tight I thought she might break my fingers. In the video, I explained everything from seeing Margaret get stood up to the panic proposal to realizing somewhere along the way that this fake relationship had become the most real thing in my life. Margaret talked about her divorce and how lonely she'd been, how she'd convinced herself she was too old to find love again. She said meeting me reminded her that life doesn't stop just because you hit 50, that happiness doesn't have an age limit. We posted it at midnight and then both turned off our phones because we were too scared to watch the responses come in. I woke up the next day to my phone buzzing so hard it fell off my nightstand and crashed onto the floor. When I finally looked at it, I had over 300 notifications. My hands were shaking as I opened the first few comments, expecting the worst. Instead, people were saying things like, "This is more romantic than if it was planned from the start," and "You two are proof that love can find you anywhere." Someone wrote, "Age is just a number when you find the right person." And another said, "Emma needs to grow up and let her mom be happy." Margaret called me at 7 in the morning, and I could hear she'd been crying but in a good way. "Jason, people are being so kind." My sister called and said she's proud of me for standing up to Emma. "Diana wants to throw us an engagement party." I felt this weight lift off my chest that I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. We'd been so scared of what people would think, but instead they were celebrating us. The coffee shop fundraiser that had been stuck at 22,000 suddenly jumped to 41,000 in just 2 days. People kept coming into the shop asking to meet us, wanting to hear the story in person, buying extra coffee just to support us. One older woman came in and hugged Margaret, saying she'd been widowed for 10 years and our story gave her hope that maybe it wasn't too late for her either. But not everyone was happy for us. Emma started posting things on social media about how I was a con artist who manipulated her mother, how the age gap was inappropriate, how Margaret was having some kind of crisis. She found old photos of when she and I were dating and posted them with captions like, "Remember when this was normal?" Her friends started commenting mean things, and a few of Margaret's relatives who'd always been close with Emma took her side. Margaret's cousin Linda called and said she thought Margaret was making a mistake, that people would always see this relationship as weird because of the connection to Emma. For 3 days, Margaret barely ate or slept. She kept reading Emma's posts over and over, and I watched her second-guess everything we'd built together. On the 4th day, I found her sitting in her car outside the coffee shop at 6 in the morning, just staring at her steering wheel. I knocked on the window, and when she unlocked the door, I slid into the passenger seat. "I don't know if I can do this," she said quietly. "Everyone's looking at us. Emma hates me. Some of my family thinks I've lost my mind. What if they're right? What if this is just me trying to prove I'm not old and washed up?" I turned in my seat to face her fully. "Look at me, Margaret. Do you love me?" Her eyes filled with tears. "You know I do." I took her hand. "Then that's all that matters. Emma's hurt and angry, and she's taking it out on us. Your cousin Linda has been judging your choices since you were 20. None of them get a vote in your happiness." Margaret wiped her eyes with her free hand. "But what if they never accept us? What if Emma never speaks to me again?" I squeezed her fingers gently. "Then that's her choice to make, and it's a terrible one. But you can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. You taught me that, actually, back when I was dating Emma and trying so hard to make everyone happy that I forgot to make myself happy." She let out a shaky laugh. "I said that." I nodded. "You did. The night of Emma's birthday party when I was stressed about work and her dad was giving me a hard time about my job. You pulled me aside and said those exact words. They stuck with me." Margaret was quiet for a long time, just sitting there in her car with the sun coming up over the buildings across the street. Finally, she looked at me and said, "Okay, let's do this for real. No more worrying about what Emma thinks or what anyone else thinks. Just us." I leaned over and kissed her, and it felt like every piece of doubt and fear just melted away. We decided right then that we were going to live our lives out loud. No more hiding or apologizing. Margaret started posting photos of us together, not to rub it in Emma's face, but just to show the world this was real. She posted a picture of us at the coffee shop with a caption that said, "Found love in the last place I expected, with the last person I expected, and I've never been happier." The response was overwhelming in the best way. People started sharing their own stories about finding love later in life or in unexpected places. A woman commented that she'd married her ex-husband's best friend 5 years after their divorce and they'd been happy for 15 years. A man said he was dating someone 20 years younger and his kids had been awful about it at first but eventually came around. Reading through all those stories made Margaret realize we weren't alone in this. 3 weeks after our video went viral, Margaret's sister Rebecca called and said Emma had asked to meet for coffee. Margaret was nervous, but she agreed because Emma was still her daughter no matter what. They met at a cafe downtown, and Margaret told me afterward that Emma had cried through most of it. Emma admitted she'd felt betrayed and confused when she first found out about us, like we'd both chosen each other over her. But after seeing how happy Margaret looked in all her photos and reading all the supportive comments, Emma realized she'd been selfish. She said she didn't know if she could be happy about the relationship right away, but she wanted to try to accept it because she missed her mom. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was a start. Margaret came home that night and collapsed on my couch, exhausted but relieved. "She's trying," Margaret said. "That's all I can ask for right now." I sat next to her and pulled her close. "That's huge. I'm proud of you for not giving up on her." For months later, I closed the coffee shop early one Tuesday evening and told Margaret I needed her help with inventory. When she walked in expecting to count supplies, she found every table covered in candles and flowers. I was standing by the big window overlooking the street, wearing the suit I'd bought for my grandmother's funeral and never worn since because it made me too sad. But tonight it felt right. I was holding my grandmother's ring, the same one I'd used for the fake proposal. But this time there was nothing fake about what I was feeling. Margaret stopped just inside the door with her hand over her mouth. I walked over to her slowly, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "The first time I proposed to you, it was to save you from embarrassment in a room full of strangers. I did it because you'd always been kind to me and I couldn't stand watching you hurt. But tonight I'm asking for completely different reasons." I got down on one knee, and Margaret's eyes were already filling with tears. "Margaret Hayes, will you marry me for real this time? Will you let me spend every day for the rest of my life making you as happy as you've made me? Will you take a chance on us even though it's complicated and messy, and some people will never understand it?" Margaret was nodding before I even finished talking. "Yes. Oh my God, yes. I mean every word. Yes." I slid the ring onto her finger for the second time, but this time it meant everything.